Hello and welcome to the British Academy. We are delighted to welcome you for today's lecture, Assyria in the 7th century BC by Professor Karen Radner. Delivered by the most outstanding academics in the UK and beyond, the British Academy's flagship lecture programme showcases the very best scholarship in the humanities and social sciences. This event is part of the Schweik Lectures on Biblical Archaeology. And just before we start, I'm just going to share with you a few quick housekeeping announcements. Firstly, we're not expecting a fire alarm test, so if you do hear the alarm, please evacuate following the signage and designated fire exits. Our staff will be on hand to guide you. The meeting point is at the top of the Duke of York steps just outside the British Academy. Another thing is to please ensure that your phone is switched off or on silent so as not to disrupt this event. You are very welcome to take photographs, but we ask please do not use flash. Lastly, there will be some time designated for audience questions at the end. But if you'd like to ask a question, please refrain from making general statements. Another thing is that you are welcome to leave this event at any time during the talk, but please do so by exiting the same doors you came in through. And now, without further ado, I'm going to share a video about the British Academy.
To welcome you to the third and last of this edition of the Schweik Lectures 2025 on the topic of Assyria in the 7th century BC. If you've been here all 3 days, you've already witnessed Armageddon. And you may remember that we were told that this evening we would endure fire, flame, and violence. The person who promised to inflict these terrors on us is, of course, the speaker, Professor Karen Radner of Munich. Karen has been introduced already twice this week. Once on Tuesday it was by Mark Whedon, who gave us a brief resume of Karen's very distinguished academic achievements. And then yesterday, we heard from Mark Altawil, who shared with us a personal glimpse of Karen at work in Assur in northern Iraq. And after 2 introductions already this week, you may feel a bit like I do, what more is there to say? Well, in the spirit of one of Karen's wonderful podcasts, which is called Assyria, a very short introduction, I am very much tempted to cut short this introduction and hand the podium over to her immediately. But before I do, Karen, stay sitting. Just allow me to recall a few details from the last 2 lectures. We encountered such wondrous novelties, at least novelties for me, as the Miyake event of 664 BC. It was the first time I'd heard of it. I guess many of you probably are very familiar with it, but I hadn't heard of this before, nor indeed had I heard of speleothems, which are sort of stalagmites packed with important data. We learned how science could document with very great precision the growing aridity of Assyria and its neighbours in the 7th century BC. And we saw how the sciences, for example, geology, climate science, astronomy, were now on hand to help historians with the interpretation of historical data and to help them with the creation of the historical narrative. But Karen is an Assyriologist. Her work on the history of Assyria is embedded, firmly founded in the science of Assyriology, which means a very close intimacy with cuneiform tablets. And we haven't heard much of cuneiform tablets yet this week. But now, at her third lecture, I have a suspicion that they're going to come out from hiding and enter into the limelight. And that suspicion arises because of the lecture's subtitle, which is Mismatched Records, How to Make Sense of Written Sources. Karen, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, I'm going to talk about texts, finally. I thought if you manage to stay here until the third evening, then you have the stomach for cuneiform. So, I will start, as I've done in the past 2 days, with a set of slides that is just meant to give us the wider historical framework. This is the kingdom of Assyria as it takes its imperial turn under the reign of Ashur II, when Kalchu was the capital. And this is the kingdom of Assyria when it was at the height of its power, when it was the center of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which stretched far beyond these black lines that demarcate the provincial system of Assyria. This is during the reign of Esarhaddon. After the age of conquest comes a very well-documented period. And we are going to look at some of the documents that we have for the 7th century, and our focus will be on the heartland and those regions where the last tablets are available from. The reason why we know so much about Assyria, specifically in the later period of the 7th century, is because, as you all know, cuneiform tablets are best preferred when exposed to fire. And that happened in Armageddon, let's put it like that. That happened during these final years of the empire, when the Medes and the Babylonians attacked cities in the heartland and beyond, and caused a fair deal of fire damage, thus better preserving clay tablets that may otherwise never have been found. It's important to me that this really makes a difference to the preservation of clay tablets. Clay tablets, of course, can survive without fire, but you may be aware of the fact that the first clay tablets found in Nimrud were under the excavations conducted by Max Mallowan. That's not because there weren't any in the other areas that had been explored. It was simply because the archaeological methods had reached a refinement by that time that allowed the recovery of texts that are essentially just clay in a surrounding area of yet more clay. Yeah? I want to remind you also that in Turkey, which is very much part of cuneiform culture, the first unfired tablets were only found at in the very last years of the 20th century. when the northern Tigris excavations took place. That was at Girigiano, and in the year soon after, tablets followed from Tushhan. I'm going to talk about those today. So it really depends very much on how you excavate, whether you will find unfired clay tablets. If you do a good enough job, you will find them. You will often damage them. You know, we all have seen tablets that have one sort of side sort of shorn off. That's because the trowel that first caught them cut through them very easily. That is not the case once a tablet has been fired, once a tablet has been exposed to fire. And while some tablets were intentionally fired, the vast majority was not. And so, in a way, we need to be quite grateful, we as Assyriologists, for the fact that these wars brought Assyria to an end in this brutal and savage way that they did, because otherwise we wouldn't really know as much as we do about Assyria. So, we can compare that, for example, with Cyrus conquering Babylon. You know, where are the Babylonian state archives? Well, you know, Cyrus didn't need to set anything on fire, didn't need to burn the palace down. The Babylonians welcomed him. So, you know, for us, this is quite good. And I have here a display from the Ashur-Banipal exhibition in 2018, 2019, where some of the holdings of the British Museum pertaining to the Royal Assyrian Library were put on a really, really stunning display, at least beloved by all Assyriologists. I hope the general public was as captivated as we were when we saw this. Tablets survive better when the house or the palace in which they are stored are exposed to fire. And that definitely happened to the palaces, or some of the palaces in Nineveh. When we turn to Assur, for example, not all of the houses there burned down. Quite a few of them did not burn down. And that is a reason why, for example, in the excavations during Walter Andre's work in the early 20th century, you know, the result of mapping these finds produces a very uneven picture. Not every house produced cuneiform tablets. Some did, others did not. That's not because some of the people didn't have cuneiform records, it's just that their houses didn't burn down, yeah? Okay, so that's quite important to me. I think it's sort of underappreciated, really, how difficult and tricky it is to actually really find an unfired clay tablet, especially if the soil is not completely dry. It's far easier in the south of Iraq than it is further up in the north, where the climatic conditions are generally more, let's say, benign. Okay, so today we are going to focus no longer on Sennacherib, but instead on Esarhaddon, his son and successor, and Ashur-Banipal, his grandson, and then the successors of Ashur-Banipal. We've encountered all of them at varying degrees, and we will be continuing a lot of discussions or arguments that I've started earlier. Now I want to deepen a point that I made yesterday, the changes to the bureaucracy, to officialdom in Assyria after 670 BC. You may remember that the Babylonian chronicles have this line: for the year 670, in Assyria, the king put numerous magnates to the sword. The magnates in Assyrian, the big ones, the great ones, are the highest echelons of Assyrian officialdom. And, you know, the king normally doesn't kill them off. Yeah? They are all personally appointed by the king. So this is an indication of a severe problem in the empire. We happen to know that this happened in conjunction with the uncovery of a conspiracy in which a number of magnates and high municipal and military officials took place that sought to replace Esarhaddon with someone else on the throne, and was meant to eradicate the seed of Sennacherib. Yeah? So the people that supported this didn't want to see Sennacherib's line continued on the Assyrian throne and declared all his offspring illegitimate. They didn't succeed, and as a consequence, Esarhaddon had a lot of people killed. So many that the Babylonian chronicler thought that this was the most significant thing to have happened in that year. Okay, so this we can juxtapose with an artifact that Esarhaddon himself commissioned, that is the so-called Sangioli stele. We've looked at it a bit on Monday. Shows the king as the conqueror of Egypt, leading one of the princes of Kush and a Phoenician ruler by the nose rope, and on the sides the princes Ashur, Banipal, and Shamash-Shumukin are depicted. What I want to sort of recall is that Esarhaddon there, among his various epitheta, says he is the merciless one, the one who curbs the insolent ones. He broke all of those disobedient to him, the rulers unsubmissive to him, like a reed in the swamp, and trampled them underfoot. And marked here in purple, he calls himself avenger of the father who engendered him. So that refers to the murder of Sennacherib. And he portrays himself here as the one who brought revenge for this horrible deed. Yeah? We can be fairly certain that the 670 massacre is not the first time Esarhaddon killed off magnates. He does so as soon as he comes to the throne. If one looks at the prosopography, if one looks at the titles of people at court, it's very clear that there is a disruption, yeah? At least on this level of society, yeah? It's on Monday, I think I was fairly generous and positive when I was talking about Esarhaddon, comparatively speaking. He had some good ideas about succession and, you know, the relationship vis-a-vis the rest of the world and so on. One thing that I really cannot approve of is killing off one's civil servants. I myself am a civil servant. I wouldn't like to be killed off just because some of us conspired against the Bavarian minister-president. I'm sure there are people that do that. So this wholesale solution is generally a bad idea, I'm sure. You know, doing this twice within 11 years, that's really, really bad politics, given that it takes a long time to train an Assyrian administrator. We know that they were literate, and that alone, you know, takes time to learn. We know that their jobs usually combined sort of like, you know, civic duties or administrative duties with military duties. So they had to sort of cover quite a range of abilities. On the whole, it's just very bad to kill off the people that in previous generations provided really the backbone of the empire. On Monday, I answered a question in regard to the role of the magnates in the 8th century. At that time, there was a sort of a period of weakness in the royal family because there was no adult king to be had. At that time, it was the loyalty and this balance of power between the highest magnates that kept the whole empire going. So on the whole, I think we should never underestimate how important the officials of the empire were. Yeah? So there was really a class of people that had been recruited at an extremely early age and educated at the expense of the crown to serve in this position. To kill off loads of them within a dozen years is just a bad investment, I would say. We can look at the available archival texts to see that these administrative changes that must have followed this in 670 BC did not just affect the highest level of the administration. So this was not just limited to the magnates, yeah? Those are the provincial governors and the highest court officials, some of whom also ruled over provinces. We can see that the changes happen at various levels of Assyrian society. I don't want to talk too much about this and limit myself to two examples that I have previously studied. On the one hand, on the municipal level, we see that the city administration gets very complicated. Yeah? Traditionally, there was a mayor who is a local notable. In Assur, for example, this office was held at one point by the chief goldsmith of the Ashur temple, so that's the kind of person you want for this. And it seems that traditionally this person was chosen from among the sort of inhabitants is too much, citizens is, maybe sort of misleading, but from, a group of people from within the city that had the required influence. By the time of the late reign of Esarhaddon, this gets more complex in that for Assur at least, there is now a team of 3 mayors. And it seems that one of them is appointed by the king to be the top man of this panel. Yeah? In addition to another official called Shamuchi Ali, he in front of the city, who is sent in from outside and who sort of power shares with the mayors. It's very unclear. We cannot really, for a want of sources, it's very unclear what one was to do rather than the other. But I would say that this was sort of part of the point of this, at least, by making things fairly complex at a local level. You could sort of ensure that the people of Assur wouldn't really have the time, in a way, to organize resistance, if you will, against the empire. A high dignitary in Assur was one of the people caught up in the Sazi conspiracy. I cannot really see much good that would come from sort of basically duplicating responsibility. Assur has been compared to a market town 2 days ago. I think that's a bit too much, but it's not a very, 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 very large settlement. Yeah? Why do you need 4 people who largely do the exact same thing? Yeah? So I think that there must be some kind of rationale, and in the end, it always is meant to serve the security of the crown. Esarhaddon is really, really concerned with this. We touched on that before. So that brings me to my next example. That's palace security. The palaces we've seen have a few entrances, and these entrances were patrolled by gatekeepers, and there used to be one chief gatekeeper per palace, and that was sort of enough. There was also another official who was in charge of those gates that could be locked. Not all of them could be locked, but some of them were equipped with locks, and there was a person who sort of apparently was in control of these mechanisms. Yeah? They required pegs and keys and what have you. Now, a new office is called, is created, and that person is the entrance overseer, Shapan Nerebi. Yeah? So, you know, I think one can generalize and say the strategy seems to be that the bureaucracy on very local levels is made more complex than what was there before. And that serves, in my opinion, primarily the safety and security of the crown. And that goes well with the provisions of the Covenant of Esarhaddon of 672, where basically all subjects of the crown were required to spy on each other on behalf of the crown and make sure that the king and the crown prince were safe. Yeah? So, you know, whether there are other reasons why this was deemed necessary, I cannot say. I really don't see why one would want to tinker with this system. Yeah? The old titles sometimes go back to Middle Assyrian times, and it's at this same time when we know that the crown had this really overblown concern for its own security and safety that this comes into place. So I connect that with these paranoid ideas of Esarhaddon. He wasn't only a paranoiac. I mean, people did hate the seed of Sennacherib. That much is clear. Okay, so there is. So this doesn't go away. This feeling of uncertainty and insecurity at court. From the reign of Assurbanipal onwards, we see that courtiers who normally wouldn't have occupied a role in the public eye of the entire empire were given the honor of having the year named after them. This is the traditional way Assyrians date. One man is chosen to lend his name to the year. We call them eponyms, yeah, year eponyms. And it is for centuries the magnates that held these, that were given this honor. And in the mid-7th century, all of a sudden, various people who are very closely associated with the court get given this honor. Yeah? The chief eunuchs are one example, and we will talk about Sin al-Iqbani, who he was not merely a year eponym, he was indeed granted sort of royal privileges in some tablets that date not just 1 year after him, but introduce a dating system of his reign. So there's on the one hand the chief eunuch, which we will cover again, but then there are various other offices as well. Chief cook, can also translate it as chief butcher, major domo, palace overseer, palace scribe. I mean, these are all important people, no doubt, but not on an imperial level, really. And chief musician, certainly, you know, was a role that up to that point in time was sort of not necessarily in the foremost minds of the subjects when they thought about the most powerful people in the realm. So the chief musician Bulutu was a year eponym selected and honored in the reign of Assurbanipal. And remember, yesterday we talked about these events that Ashurbanipal staged in 652 at Arbela, when these poor European envoys joined Ashurbanipal and were then made to witness various things. Ashurbanipal is very well known for his theatrics, for his big staged events. The lion hunts are one of them, and I would say that the chief musician is probably the person, the impresario, who was charged with organizing all of this. All of these events include musicians, people with harps, people with flutes, people with drums, singers. So it makes good sense to have the chief musician organize all of this. But I would say that this is the person in Assyria who most resembles the guys who staged, weird events in the Roman theaters during the imperial period. So I think it's that reason that we have Bulutu in this role. He was very, very important for Assurbanipal's messaging, and for making the people of the heartland experience Assurbanipal's victories and triumphs, and that's for sure, in the extent that we witness it there, entirely new. This rise of the courtiers continues to the very last holders of the royal office. I want to pick out the situation under Sin-Sharu-Ishkun. He was on the throne for 14 years. We can't really reliably place all eponyms at that time because the lists that give us the chronological order cut out after 648. I've only included the ones that are safely assignable to Sin-Sharu-Ishkun, and I think you can see this unbalance there quite clearly. Yes, there are some magnates. The treasurer is one of the highest ones. 2 governors, not really of the most important traditional provinces perhaps, but provincial governors nevertheless, and the rest really are courtiers. So those are the people close to the king. Those are the ones that he probably interacted with most days, and those are the ones that the king relied on the most apparently at that time. We'll come to sort of explore the notion of why this may have been, particularly during the reign of Sin-Sharu-Ishkun and Ashur-etelilani a little bit later. Okay, now we will turn to the conquest of Ashur and explore 2 points of view. So this here, I've already shown you one of my ChatGPT generated images. This is the more successful one, I feel. So I took a line drawing by Walter André, known to you all, that shows the Ashur temple as seen from the Tigris, and told ChatGPT add fire and flames and lots of arrows so that this depicts a siege of a city. That's the result. Pretty good, I have to say, compared to my Nineveh one. Okay, so for us, the point is Ashur in 614 gets invaded and gets conquered by the Medes. The Babylonians are bystanders to this. They had tried the year before to conquer the city, hadn't managed to do it because the Assyrian army intervened. And the year after, however, the Medes succeeded in this. And we will look at 2 ways in which we can explore this fact. So on the one hand, as I said, where houses went up in flames at that time, we can see everyday activities of the inhabitants frozen in time, which is very, very different from analyzing archives, family archives that had been assembled over generations. Okay, so we will explore one of these archives a little bit. It's the archive of the wine traders. And the house of where they were found is marked here with a yellow X. This was first excavated in 1990 by a team headed by Bartel Huda and then further explored by Peter Miglus in 2000, 2001, and Mark Altai-Wühl and I were at that time parts of the team. I had been given the task of publishing the tablets at that time already because Huda had meant to excavate. Indeed, yeah, he wanted to find a trader's archive for sure, but he wanted to excavate an old Assyrian archive. And the field epigrapher was therefore Karl Hecker, a noted old Assyrian specialist. He wasn't too keen on this new Assyrian stuff and graciously handed it over to me at some point. And that's the stuff we're dealing with. So to very briefly sum up what's to be found in this archive, 7 letters, 2 of which were never opened. This is very, very unusual. There aren't very many letters found in the private archives in Assur. 7 is really a lot, a hell of a lot, and you will see why this is a little bit later. 25 legal documents, they really sort of come from various times in the 7th century. Some are quite early. The latest ones date to the reign of Sin-Sharu-Ishkun, including the years of the major domo and the palace scribe. And then there are 36 accounting records of a very, very strange nature that have not been identified anywhere else in that way. And they all concern the financing and payouts of trading ventures that are conducted with a combination of donkey caravans that go up north and then rafts that come back on the river. Yeah? And so there is a partnership between various men that spread the risk. Yeah? Those, they make a contract with each other that we can describe as a partnership contract or a risk-sharing contract. One sort of has assembled the capital, and then at least one other person, often more, joins him to spread the risk. Yeah? And of course also any profits. Yeah? So this tells us that there is risk associated with the whole thing, because otherwise you wouldn't even think about having anyone else participate in this. Okay. We also learned that there are various people that act on these partners' behalf, and they are the ones who actually go up and come down with the merchandise and first with the money. Yeah? And they do this up to 3 times a year. Yeah? So we have these documents, the first journey, the second journey, the third journey of the guy who does it. It's theoretically possible that there are more than 3, that you could do more than 3 journeys in the year, but our archive ends apparently before any potential 4th journey could have been financed. Yeah? Okay. So the meats came in autumn to Assur, so, at some point the river wouldn't have been, suitable for shipping anyway. But so I'm not saying that necessarily there are only 3 such journeys per person per year possible. All I'm saying is that at that time, when our archive is frozen, yeah, that was at the time of the third journeys per person taking place. These accounting documents are fascinating because they give us a sense of, they're just normal people in Assur. Anyone who had some spare cash, even very small sums, could sort of pay into this trading venture, could sort of help raise the capital. The larger sums are in silver, and the smaller sums are in grain. That's normal. We have quite a lot of women invest in this, including loads of Egyptian women. Yeah, whether that's coincidence or not, I cannot tell you. The situation gets more complicated by the fact that the neighboring house was occupied by Egyptians. Yeah, so I'm quite tempted to sort of say that, well, traditionally Egyptian women participate, with this I mean women in Egypt participated far more in commerce and trade and business and so on than Assyrian women. But in any case, it's very remarkable that most of the women that are mentioned are Egyptian women, yeah? And it's sort of, otherwise it's sort of all sorts of people, you know? And some of the sums are really, really small, you know? Okay, and some are large. Okay, so, and we have nothing like this from anywhere else within Assur at that time. So if this house hadn't been found, we wouldn't know anything about the private trading companies, because there are several for sure, of Assur in the 7th century, yeah? But because we have this, we know that we must take seriously the fact that Ashur, as a city with special privileges, had inhabitants who were all exempt from a range of taxes, yeah? And they were especially exempt from sort of import-export taxes when reaching Assur, okay? So import-export, in a way, worked more like on a city level than on a border level. While I like to draw black lines around the provinces of Assyria, there was no one standing there monitoring trade. That happened at the city gates and at the harbors of the settlements. Okay, so that's our archive of wine traders, and I will now focus on the 7 letters, yeah? 2 of which were found in their envelopes. This is really, really unusual. There's one other case from Ashur, a letter from one temple official to another temple official that was found in a street, okay? So maybe it got lost, or maybe it's also really, really late. And then there is an example from the state correspondence where sort of anyone could write to the king in theory, but wasn't guaranteed that the letters would be opened, and there was such a case. That's in the British Museum. It's a really funny letter. I mean, it's sort of someone who just really wants a favor, but clearly no one is willing to help him out. So the last, he's written a couple of times already, as he mentions, and his last letter was never opened, poor thing. But so it's very, 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 very rare to find an unopened Assyrian letter. Could also mention one example from Durkat Limo from Tel Sheikh Hamad, but that's actually written in Babylonian, so it doesn't count. Okay, so super, super rare. I want also to take up one bit of discussion we had yesterday, that was river transport from the north to the south. You may remember that I argued that grain from Urartu could really easily be brought down from Lake Van using probably the Botansu and then the Tigris, and now I will show you how that would be done in practice. We start with this. This is, on the one hand, a legal document that documents a silver debt, or a debt in silver, of 1.5 minas of silver, so let's say 750 grams of silver. So, respectable sum. You could buy 3 slave women at the time, or 1.5 male slaves. Roughly speaking, at that time, so not too cheap, really. And this sum of silver was meant to be repaid in the shape of a raft composed of 16 animal skins. Yeah, and the image above the translation shows a detail from a scene in Sennacherib's southwest palace that illustrates the building of Nineveh, and especially the transporting of stone across the river. And you see then how such a raft made with animal skins would have looked like. What I want to point out is, I mean, they transport a fairly heavy load. These are big, big slabs of stone, and there are just 2 men sitting there steering that thing. Yeah, so you know, you don't need a whole lot of people to maneuver such a thing down the river, or in this case, across the river. Whether that guy with the animal skin that he uses as a like floating device, whether he's, you know, a part of the team or whether he's just sort of swimming towards them to guide them, I cannot tell you. Yeah. Okay, but in any case, you don't need, you know, 20 people to handle such a thing. Yeah. Okay. So such rafts used to be maneuvered along the Tigris until very recently. I've personally never seen one. In theory, I guess it's possible that they are still being used in Iraq, and there are many people who have spent a long time there, so maybe one of you has ever seen one made from animal skins. But you can go to various places in the world and see this mode of transport. It's not something that is very, very typical only for Tigris shipping. Here's an image of a Chinese fisherman. So his animal skins are clearly pig skins. I guess you can see this. In Assyria, they seem to either, because they sometimes specify the size, so they either use sheep, that's normal, and presumably sheep includes also goats because they are largely the same size, or cow, cattle. So the big size would be cattle. Okay, here is an account from my fellow Austrian. My husband has scolded me for pointing out every day that I'm Austrian. This is because I don't want you to think that I'm German. So and you may be thinking that, but no, I'm Austrian, and proudly so. And Alois Musil was one of these travelers in the beginning of the 20th century, when all the European powers were preying on the Ottoman Empire and were sending basically their glorified spies there to gather information because they all wanted to do stuff there. And Alois Musil was sent by the Austrians. So even Austria was part of this big game at the time. And he published a book called The Middle Euphrates, a topographical itinerary in 1927 in English. It was published in New York, which has this account of a river transport on the Tigris that he witnessed in 1912. I'll briefly read it to you. Some raftsmen returning from Baghdad were lying down for a short rest. Their donkeys were laden with large panniers filled with bags sewn of tanned goat skins. The raftsmen traveled with these bags as far as Kurdistan, which at that time doesn't refer to like the Iraqi region that we nowadays often refer to as Kurdistan, but really eastern Turkey. Yeah? Okay, where they buy lumber, grain, wool, or butter. Then they make small rafts of the lumber, and tying skin bags filled with air underneath and loading the rafts, they sail down the Tigris to Baghdad. There they sell everything with the exception of the skin bags. These they put again on their donkeys, which they either bring with them or buy on the road and go back to trade with the Kurds once more. Yeah? And all the elements of this account we can find in these 7 letters, which is really remarkable, you know? I mean, we knew from the document I showed you and from the image in Sennacherib's palace that mashkuru means inflatable boat, yeah? And we sort of, knew that they were used, but this really shows us that they were used pretty much exactly as they were in 1912 when Alois Musil witnessed these traders. So I'm going through this quickly because this is really published. The translations that are published are in German, but I think you can manage if you want to look it up. Here we have a letter of 2 of the partners who are upstream on the Tigris. They write to Duri Ashur. He is the guy who lives in this house where the letters were found. And they have sent off a raft, and now they want more capital to be sent up to them from Ashur. And they are really, really, really impatient. Yeah? So all of these letters convey a sense of urgency. This is all, everything needs to be done yesterday, you know? And they sometimes are really, really rude to each other. So what's also interesting is that while it's a letter sent by two people, it's still written in the first person singular, so don't mind that. 52 letter skins, including a cowhide. So, you know, that sort of would be roughly like 3 of these rafts that we know were sort of costed about 1.5 minas of silver. So 3 such rafts. I've sent them to you, custody of Nabu Eriba, for silver. May you send the silver here so that I can set out and go abroad. And then some more, and then so send me the silver. Why do you leave me idle and make me a man with nothing to do? What else is there to say? So they're really, really sort of pushing for action. Okay, so the next letter is really a set of 2 letters. One, again, is written only to Duri Ashur, that's the one here. And the other one is written to him and to Tabshar Papachi, who made an appearance in the first letter. And so the longer letter deals with 2 things. The green part is what I will focus on first. We read, the raft with the leather skins belonging to Agdasha will soon set out. If it is your intention to do work, bring the silver. That's their job in Assur. They are meant to send up people with money that can be used to buy stuff up north. Yeah? And if they don't do their job, which is to raise capital among these Egyptian women and other people in Assur, then the others sit up there and have to, you know, wait, and they don't like doing that. Yeah? So if it's your intention to do work, just bring the silver. It has been handed over. We want to do the work according to our remit. Now the 5 minas of silver will increase due to interest, and they will increase at your expense. Let all the silver from these leather skins come here quickly. So they give us a reason why this is so urgent. Like most debts in Assyria, they accumulated interest rather quickly. Yeah? So the interest is really high, but this is the norm. So interest is normally 1/5 or 1/4 of the sum, and it really, unless there are exemptions, it really starts at the go. Yeah? So if this takes long, they will have to pay out money that they otherwise wouldn't have to pay. So that's why this, you know, it's urgent. They are not dealing only with their own money, they are sort of getting money from all sorts of people. And then the other bit that is in both letters, and that's quite fascinating really, that also demonstrates that all of these letters were written basically at the same time. That's also clear from the people that are being mentioned. It deals with very specifically the purchase of a donkey. Yeah? And Ashur Matutakin feels that he has to justify why on earth he bought a donkey up north when any person knows that you take the donkeys from Ashur up north and if required sell them off there, but you certainly don't buy them there. He has to do that because 3 of the donkeys he is working with, which he needs to bring these leather skins up north, are so sick that they can't carry anything. Yeah, they are at death's door. And that's why he had to buy a donkey from someone else for a huge sum of money, 56 shekels of silver. That's very, very expensive. Compare that again to the price of a raft of 16 skins that costs 90 shekels of silver, and this donkey here changes hands for 56 shekels of silver. So totally expensive, complete rip-off. So, but he has to do it because otherwise he's stuck and he can't do his job. That's why he does it. Again, mention of interest. and again, mention of things need to be done quickly. So Tapshar, Ashur needs to be dispatched quickly. Yeah? We also have a mention here of shoes and textile bundles. So there is quite often a reference to finished goods, textiles that are sent up from Assur. So in addition to taking money, they seem to also take some finished goods from Assur that are also being sold there. But that's not the bulk of the business, yeah? Okay, so here we have someone who is not, I've been vague about this because we'll talk about where they are specifically in a moment, but here we have a letter that, so Mukin Ashur isn't part of the people up north. So he seems to be somewhere else. And it seems that he is in Arbela, yeah, in Arbail. And I assume that because, first of all, he mentions Ishtar of Arbela twice, yeah, in the beginning and then at the end. And also the bulk of the merchandise is of a different nature. The rest of the business seems to concern wine. We'll get to that in a second. And this letter deals with grain, yeah? But again, everything is really, really urgent. Everything needs to be done quickly. And he is really angry because some of the things that he had asked for haven't been done, yeah? Then this small, tiny little fragment here, that's all that remains of that letter. Poor excavation practice, possibly, who knows? But in any case, this has very, very little, but it says, I swear that neither a liter nor half a liter of wine will disappear. You know, that's quite sweet, I think. And the last two letters have never been opened, yeah? So here is one of them. I think it's really important to point out that letters from the royal correspondence don't have any information on the envelope apart from who is the writer of the letter and who is the addressee, and then there is a seal, yeah? Okay, and these letters have these postscriptums on the envelope, things that when we have also the inner tablet are nowhere to be found. So this letter remains unopened. It was found like this, and I was never given permission in the Iraq Museum to have it opened. So very, very sad, and I hope maybe the nefarious influence of the British Museum and its way of dealing with tablets nowadays, but I first asked in 2001, and even then I wasn't allowed. So I would dearly like to know what the letter says, but I can't tell you because it has not yet been opened. But in any case, there is on the postscriptum we learn about some textiles that need to be sent up north. And we learn what the wages of a boatman are. Shekel of silver, you know, that sort of puts the whole 56 shekels of silver for a donkey into perspective, yeah? Okay, so I mean, a few days' work, presumably, to steer such a raft down the Tigris. But, you know, shekel is a normal wage, yeah? So 56 shekels of silver for a donkey is really extraordinary. And this is the last letter that was found cracked. It was found intact, but with a crack. And it was opened upon excavation. So this was way before I had anything to do with it. So I'm not taking the blame for this. Again, the envelope has information that we don't find otherwise. Again, it deals with a garment. And the letter itself gives us now insight in where specifically up north is. Up north it must be because they clearly go up the Tigris and then sail down, yeah? So up north is for sure correct, but here we learn that it's specifically Zamachu, yeah, Tel Rimach, where they are. And it also spells out, not the only time, but very clearly, that what they transport is wine, yeah? So the Jebel Sinjar, where Tel Rimach is located, is actually really suitable for wine cultivation. We know that it was used in that way in the 7th century because various people who could afford it bought vineyards. That was a really good investment. From texts like these, it's very clear that they did not only grow wine for their own consumption, but because it was something that could be sold apparently very easily. Because there were very many eager customers. So wine drinking is relatively common at that time in Assur, but it's also not exactly new, but it's something that only comes into widespread use in the late 8th century, and at that time it causes one of the very few changes in the Assyrian pottery tradition, because there is now a certain type of bowl that people use to drink wine. Yeah? Before that, wine was really the reserve of court and temple only, and it was only in the context of, state banquets and so on, and religious ceremonies that you would get wine. Yeah. By the 7th century, this is very different, and these Egyptian women, clearly, loved the stuff. Okay. So here we really have a lot of information that is quite fascinating. So again, one of the people involved accuses others in the business of being, absolute amateurs and wasting everyone's time and not doing what they are meant to do. Here it's again Ashur Matutakim. So we've encountered him numerous times. So this is the second person who accuses him of being a time waster. So probably he would have gotten the boot soon enough, but other things happened. This letter never reached Duri Ashur, and neither did the other one. Yeah, never opened. Yeah, so these were written very, very late in the day. And Ashur Matutakim escaped probably being fired from the business, because what he had done is really inexcusable in this very time-sensitive business. He had prevented the wine transport from setting out for 18 days, claiming that the river was too shallow to allow wine transport. So that's where I will say something that is specific to the wine trade with these animal skins. Yeah. So obviously it's clear how you make these rafts. You sort of have an animal, a dead animal. You sort of tie together the legs and the neck, and you have a wonderful balloon. Yeah. Then you inflate it, and then you tie them together, and then you can load various things on top of this, inflatable. Any wood that was brought down wasn't so much a support, but really part of the merchandise, yeah, and was also always sold off, yeah. So the key component are the animal skins, yeah. Now, if you transported stone, obviously you had to put that on top of your animal skins, yeah. But if you transported liquids, you could put them into the animal skins, yeah? You would only partially inflate the animal skin, and you would have part of the skin filled with wine, and that cooled the wine, because generally speaking, it wouldn't be a great idea to have the wine skins lie on top of your raft while sailing down the Tigris in the hot sun, yeah? So that's the reason why the guy argues, no, we can't do it, the river is too shallow, because if the river is shallow, there is a danger that the wineskins are sliced by some stone or whatever, some obstacle, and that you lose your precious merchandise. But says Nabutakinani, that wasn't actually true because he saw another caravan. He says caravan, he means then the raft transport pass by, and clearly, Ashur Matutakin is not very good at his job and is just horrible, Okay, but we learn from this really so much. If we didn't have this letter, we wouldn't know where they were procuring the wine. We would, I would probably assume that they would go as far as the Tur Abdin, because that's the next wine growing region. That's Isala. The wine there is really famous. But, so we know that they go only up to the Jebel Sinjar. We get a really good idea of the organization that is behind all of that. And what I think is crucial for our topic here is that we wouldn't know anything about this had the Medes not conquered Ashur in 614. Yeah? And they burned down that house, and that's why these letters are preserved. Why Duri Ashur didn't read these last two letters that were delivered to him, I cannot tell you. He may have been busy in the granary or whatever. But all these letters were presumably written very, very shortly before the Medes came. Yeah? They were written at a very, very quick rate. Yeah, so basically the partners up north sometimes wrote sort of duplicate information to Duri Ashur and someone else, and that is why I would say this archives gives us the very best information we have about literacy rates, at least in the city of Ashur. They were very high, as I will maintain for the rest of my life. Yeah, so all of these people up there were literate. They didn't have scribes. That wasn't part of the business model, yeah? They had to be able to do this, and they also dealt with quite sensitive information. The last bit I want to say about these letters is that you will see here all of the letters are in the traditional format that we associate with the state correspondence. So long, thin, oblong tablets in an envelope that sort of is then in landscape format, yeah? But some of the letters are in this simpler format. These two were never encased in an envelope, yeah? They were just like this. We have more such letters from Assur and also some from Kalku, they didn't require an envelope because the information wasn't sensitive enough. As soon as they talk about money, they use an envelope. It's quite funny, really, I think. So that's that, really. There's, if you look at this, or any other stuff from us, really, you don't have the sense of a people in panic. At that time, however, the Babylonians have been attacking Assyria for a number of years, and so I'd say there's really a false sense of security in the Assyrian heartland at that time. So, Sennacherib at the beginning of the century didn't bother with sort of really thinking much about the defensive position of Nineveh. And despite the fact that in 615 the Babylonians had tried to take Ashur, the people of Assur sort of just went about with their business, didn't really save money because they intended to flee, I don't know, to Anatolia or whatever, but instead, frittered their money away for wine, which is really not an essential, no matter what some people will tell you. I'm looking at you, Andrew. Okay, so the other aspect, and that's the last thing I'll be covering in this lecture series, is what the pillaging and of the Ashur temple means. So when Ashur was taken, the temple was looted. Yeah. Okay, and 2 years later, the king of Assyria died. Circumstances unknown, but somehow associated with the defeat at Nineveh. So what now? Traditionally, every single king of Assyria was confirmed as king, was enthroned on New Year's Day in the Ashur temple. Yeah? They were in power before, but only from the moment that they were enthroned by Assur were they truly, fully the kings of Assyria. Yeah? So if there is no functioning Ashur temple anymore, if there is no cult of Ashur anymore, what do you do? This is not a tradition that they invented a few years earlier. This is something that has been going on at least since the 14th century. So, according to the Babylonian chronicle, the person who succeeds Sin-Sharu-Ishkun ascends the throne in Haran, not in Assur. And before we go into that, we have to just ask the questions, how was Ashur-uballit related to Sin-Sharu-Ishkun, the last king of Assyria? I mean, you know, if you don't think about it, you would naturally assume that it must be his son, yeah? But how likely is that? I want to go back to the year 631 when Ashurbanipal dies. Yeah? So he had come to the throne in 668. Then he was probably a young adult, old enough to have fathered children already, but, you know, not long out of his teens. He was married at the time. He had plenty of opportunity to father more children. And it's very, very strange, I said that already earlier, that by the time he dies, there is no adult pretender to the throne to be had. Yeah? Why is that so? Well, we know that from what his two successors say about themselves. Yeah? So the first one is Ashur Etelilani. He has a very nice name, which means the god Ashur is the prince of gods. Yeah? And he gives full credit to the chief eunuch Sin-Shumuleshir, whom I've portrayed here with a Playmobil figurine of a vampire wearing a top hat. So he's a villain in my slide at least. He gives full credit to Sin-Shumuleshir for having brought him onto the throne, because his rise was contested by various people, including the military commander Nabu-Recht-Utsur, about whom we know nothing else, but the fact that he didn't want Ashur Etelilani on the throne, and Sin-Shumuleshir successfully countered him. Yeah? He is on the throne, he being Ashur Etelilani is on the throne for only a handful of years and is followed by another person who is also the son of Ashurbanipal. I've not portrayed him as a child, you will note, but as someone who has at one point then a big beard. That's simply because he's on the throne for 14 years. Yeah? At some point he will have reached adulthood, but when he came to the throne, apparently not. Yeah? He gives full credit to the gods for having made him king, but the way he phrases it really suggests that, again, he was a child. We'll look at that in a second. He had a rival to the throne. This is the poorly known Itu-Ilu, this guy, who we only know from the Babylonian chronicles, but who sort of contested Sin-Sharu-Ishkun's kingship for 7 years or something like that. Yeah? And we really don't know who he was, but his power base was Syria, Ebianari, yeah? West of the Euphrates. Yeah? And at one point, of course, Nabopolassar, king of Babylon, also comes into the fray, and he sort of contests basically already Sin-Shumuleshir, and never ever accepts Sin-Sharu-Ishkun as his superior. But we'll focus on the two boy kings. So what do they tell us about the time when they came to the throne? Yeah? Ashur-etililani says in 2 land grants with which people that had supported him are being honored, he says, after my father who had engendered me, that's Ashurbanipal, had departed, meaning had died, no father brought me up or taught me to spread my wings, no mother cared for me or saw to my education. I think it's worthwhile pointing out that the mother is here connected to education. Sin Shumulesha, the chief eunuch, who had deserved well of my father, who had engendered me, guided me like a father, and placed me safely on the throne of my father who had engendered me. He made the people of Assyria, great and small, keep watch over my kingship during my minority. He spells it out. He respected my royalty. Well, there were doubts in the empire about that, because at least in Babylonia, Sin Shumulesha assumed at one point the role of king himself. But in any case, here Ashur-etililani points out that the eunuch respected his royalty. We can, of course, have educated guesses as to who had written this text or composed this. The boy king or his mentor who is praised here. His brother Sin-Sharu-Ishkun, his name means the god Sin established the king. That's a beautiful name, if you are looking for a boy's name, but really not a name fit for a king at all. It's a typical name for someone who serves the king, not the king himself. So super weird name. Whether Ashur-etililani was born with this beautiful king appropriate name, we do not know, but it's very strange, to me at least, that Sin-Sharu-Ishkun didn't have his name changed. So he says in his inscriptions, at the beginning of my kingship, after the gods, long row of gods, all of them male, chose me among my brothers. So there's not just one, there's more. That's why this Itu-Ilu, the one who is at one point in Syria, maybe is another of Ashurbanipal's late-born sons. So chose me among my brothers and desired me as king. They guided me like a father and a mother. Why not include Ishtar here? Then this whole mother thing would make a bit more sense. No, that these male gods all guided him like a father and a mother and killed my foes, cut down my enemies, performed good deeds for me, and gladly placed me on the royal throne of my father who had engendered me. So, that shows us that, even in the second time a successor comes to the throne, there is again a succession war. So that's not really healthy, yeah? So really, Ashurbanipal, scholar, empire builder, a librarian, not very good at protecting Assyrian kingship. Yeah? Esarhaddon had made everyone aware how old and ancient Assyrian kingship was, reminding everyone that Adasi had founded, the Assyrian royal house, 1,000 years ago. Ashurbanipal really has to be blamed in part for Armageddon, because it's not a good idea to leave the empire to a bunch of children who can't decide anything by themselves and are therefore left to the ploy of people that are around them. So one clue that we have how old Sin-Sharu-Ishkun may have been when he came to power in 626 is that it's only in 623 that he personally gets to lead the army, according to the Babylonian chronicles. Before that, it always says the Assyrian army does this, does that, but it's only in 623 that the king of Assyria leads the army. Yeah. So let's say he's 16 by the time it's 23 or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so this is all really, really bad, and is definitely a contributing factor to the downfall of Assyria, and that brings me back to this. How is Ashur-uballit, who is the successor, related to Sinjar Ishkun. So it's really unlikely that he was his son. That's sort of biologically difficult. Unless he too was a mere child. And if that was the case, we really mustn't blame the poor thing from not saving the empire at Haran. In any case, I leave you with this, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Fascinating lecture, full of enormous quantity of information and more original thoughts and ideas than I can remember ever encountering in a lecture before. There isn't so much time now, but I'll start off, shall I, with asking you about Ashur Uballit at Haran.
Yeah.
There has been an idea that there is a dynastic connection between the Sargonids and Haran. What's your view on that?
Well, I mean, sorry, I forget what this was. Well, Sennacherib, Sin Acheeriba, is a prominent example of a member of the Sargonid dynasty with a Sin name that he holds on to after coming to the throne. And he's not the only member of the family with Sin names. We've also already discussed the fact that in Sennacherib's reorganization, let's say, of the highest gods of the empire, Sin of Haran has this very prominent role. And at least from that time onwards, the Assyrian kings also really, really extend their patronage, as builders, very prominently to Haran, in a way that they don't do for other cities in the empire, so yes, there must be something there. What precisely this dynastic connection may be is a bit unclear, and later on, of course, this is revived by the last king of Babylon, Nabonidus, who claims some, again, very unclear, very intentionally vague link to the Assyrian dynasty via his mother, who had some kind of temple connection to Haran. So whatever, I like to speculate, but I don't think it can be a purely, a family origin story. It's more than that. I think if you look at the map of Assyria, and if you remember that it is Sennacherib who elevates Nineveh to the position that it has, if you look at the map, for once we don't have a map now, but Haran, modern Urfa, doesn't sit on the Euphrates, it's on the Balich, but basically if you have Nineveh on the Tigris and you have Haran near the Euphrates, let's say, you sort of control the two most important cities for the north-south trade. So I mean, one idea is simply to say, instead of alienating everyone by picking Nineveh as the capital, I've written about it a couple of times. So I mean, it's one thing to create a new city or turn some obscure city like Kaihu into the main residence of the empire. It's quite a different thing if you take Nineveh, which is one of the big three being Ashur, Arbela, and Nineveh, and elevate that one city beyond everything else. So I could imagine that in order to balance everything out a bit, he also then extended the royal patronage very much to Haran. He's the first one to do that, to just create a better sense of balance in the empire. He didn't care about the south, we know that fully well, yeah, but he very much cared about the east-west expansion of Assyria. So that's one thing that because I like geopolitical explanations better than religious ones, yeah, but there is definitely something there. I just don't think that they originate there, because we know and have to accept that Sargon didn't found a new dynasty, but that he is one of the sons of Tiglath-Pileser III.
Mm-hmm. But you could also point out that perhaps, as an example of strategic withdrawal, Nineveh being lost, where else is he going to go? He can't go south.
No, but Assurbanipal had appoints when he's early in his reign. He appoints two of, Esarhaddon has loads of children, and two of the brothers are appointed as the heads of the temples of Babylon and of Haran. Yeah, so there is no doubt that Haran is really, really important, and that the temples of Haran merit special consideration. So, and once the heartland is lost, well, you could go to the Upper Tigris region, for example. But I think it's the natural. It's natural to go to Haran for many reasons, and one of them is for sure that there is a temple that you can use. And also, of course, at that time, Egypt has entered the battle, and that's where they will arrive sooner or later. So, if you only think in terms of, let's retreat, let's just, go somewhere where we are safe, the court could have gone other places, but if they had realistic hopes at that time to really rally what was left, then Haran is the obvious choice for sure.
Well, thank you. We only have a few minutes now, so I think it's a good sport to allow other people in.
Yes.
Is there a question from the audience, please? Yes, here. Yes.
The trade model of rafts and donkey caravans, presumably that must have been going on since the very earliest times of Mesopotamian civilization. And we see it here, whereas wine is one of the largest merchandises, but that, as you say, can be expected only in the last, in relatively recent history at that point. Mm-hmm. So what do you imagine was the major things carried in the centuries before?
Well, pretty much, good question. So question is, what would the rafts carry down before wine got so popular? Well, grain for once, as mentioned in this letter from sort of the eastern parts. And I'd say everything that Alus Musil mentions, butter is one of them, milk products. That's also really well suited, of course, for river transport. And wood, which we know, and also stone, because none of these materials are easily to be had in the south of Mesopotamia, but even in the Assyrian region, not really very, very easily obtainable. So pretty much everything, but notably anything that might spoil on top of your raft, you'd put into the raft and have at the bottom of your animal skins.
How about metals?
If they what we know best about international trade is the old Assyrian period, and there is no good river route, from Kültepe to Tigris. But yes, I would absolutely assume that any metal that they would bring down from regions on the Tigris and its tributaries would come by river trade. Because of the problem with Urartu, there was, 200 years of no-go zone, basically further up than the Upper Tigris, but it leaves us with the Sab region that comes out of Iran, so the lower Zab and the Diyala, yeah, and there are some very, very good metal deposits there, yeah. So pretty much you can put anything on a raft, as long as you are careful with, the height of the water, as we've learned, and as long as you have people that can handle this, yeah. Otherwise, you have the same problem that the French had when they brought down their bull colossi from Khorsabad on rafts on the Tigris and sunk them. Yeah, even the British, of course, used such rafts to sail down the Kuyunjik library and other things. Yeah, so you can transport an elephant. Anything really.
We have got time for one extremely quick question, if it's going to get an extremely quick answer.
Yes, I will. I promise. John, thank you.
Karen, thank you. In that list of gods who supported Sin Sharishkan, why do you think Ishtar was omitted?
Well, he wasn't a fan. That's clear. You know, as I know, that the notable building project conducted during Sin Sharu Utzur's reign was the creation of the Nabu temple on top of the Ishtar temple in Assur. So that's, there are Ishtars pretty much everywhere, and that's a sign of real disrespect, I would say. Whether we can extend that more generally, I dare not say. What is important is that these guys writing letters, they retained their fondness for Ishtar of Arbela, yeah? But Sin Sharu Ishkun possibly really didn't care much for this goddess in particular.
Well, I think we have to bring matters to a close now. We have to thank Karen for 3 wonderful evenings and very fascinating lectures. I mean, I thought I knew something about the end of the Assyrian Empire and what went on, but now I see that I'm completely ignorant about it. There's so much that you have taught us about the history and the characters involved at the end of the empire, and the details also of trading ventures in Ashur. This is absolutely fascinating. Forerunners of the East India Company. Consortia-led investment trading ventures. So I hope you'll join me now again in thanking Karen for her lectures, this one, but also the other 2 that preceded it.
Just want to take a quick moment to thank Karen for such an incredible 3 nights here. Just to let you all know that we will be sending out sort of feedback forms via Eventbrite, and we really do look at that feedback, and we really appreciate your feedback too. And just to let you know, the building will close today quite promptly, so if you can please make your way out as soon as possible, that would be greatly appreciated by our team. Thank you so much.